Hello, I'm Janet Esterbeek, and I'm going to be talking today on pre-employment. Well, see, look, I already did it. Stop. Okay,
Just get out of your system right now. There you go.
might as well. Hello, I'm Janet Esterbeek, and today's session is going to be on pre-employment transition services implementation. This is a collaboration between vocational rehabilitation, school transition programs, and really looking at supporting competitive integrated employment outcomes for your students with disabilities. So let me tell you just quickly a little bit about myself. I was a special ed teacher. I ran a supported employment agency for 25 years. I'm also a registered nurse and ran a personal care agency. And worked at the Department of Health Services in Wisconsin on employment initiatives. I'm now working at Attainment Company and co-wrote the PREEX or Pre-Employment Transition Services Solution curricula that focuses on what we'll be talking about today. So I'm going to talk some more about PREEX. So let me first talk about the fact that this is a federal law that came into place, WIOA, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. And it really is focusing extensively on students. It's looking at all of employment outcomes for people with disabilities or not. But this focus has been on youth because they see that early intervention is really critically important. And so WIOA brought in vocational rehabilitation and looked at how do we collaborate with schools while the students are still in school and provide what they call PREEX services. So Voc Rehab now is required to spend 15% of their entire budget on youth in school. And that's students with an IEP or a 504 plan. This is pretty significant. And your partner now with vocational rehabilitation is so important with that 15% of their resources going to your students. So this is really a collaboration between VR and schools and also the whole service delivery system and looking at coordinating our IEPs, our post-secondary transition plans, and then the plans under VR. So together, we want to have students have the opportunity to get these work experiences and competitive integrated employment opportunities, all students, regardless of disability level. So the focus now is that the schools and your South Carolina Voc Rehab Department have been working together to provide these PREEX services. And also looking at how this aligns with already your South Carolina credentialing. And so we're looking at how our PREEX solution is going to be able to provide that for you as well. WIOA is really a great resource. It provides the WinTech, which is their transition program that really looks at ways to build schools and Voc Rehab partnerships. So here are the 5 required activities under PREEX. And many of you probably already know what these are if you're teaching transition or looking at providing PREEX services. So we're looking at job and career exploration, work-based learning, post-secondary education, and then workplace readiness, which is all of those really important soft skills, independent living skills, and social skills, which is what leads to success. And then self-advocacy, or also looking at peer mentoring. So these are the 5 areas. They're 1 through 5. And so we created a curriculum specifically to meet those 5 required activities. We looked at all of those and then matched them up with your 4 South Carolina employability education competencies. So basically, when you're going to be looking at this, we have those matched, and I'm going to go through each of the 5 required activities, but I'm giving you a lot of resources and materials to really help you in navigating this PREEX service system. So the first one is not number 1. I like to look at how you're going to be putting this information together. And I really look at workplace readiness. What are the skills that their students are going to need in order to be prepared and ready for employment outcomes? So here is the content that we put into it. Now, we pulled the content directly from the Technical Assistance Center through WIOA. They had listed content and competencies that they were looking for under those 5 required activities. We also know that South Carolina competencies are also match up pretty closely with this. And so we put the content clearly into each of these areas from those recommendations and their research. But one of the big areas is employability skills, of course. This is really that appearance, punctuality, those soft skills that really help to make or break a student's success in a job. And then the independent living skills is a big part of the content. This is where you're going to talk about your hygiene routine, knowing and understanding nutrition and meal preparation. We talk about budgeting and money basics in this area, and then safety skills as well, learning how to take care of your own apartment or household, and then how to get around your community and know even what's available in your community for recreation or education or jobs, of course. And then what does relationships mean? So those are all the independent living skills we included in the content. And of course, basic job seeking skills. How do you write a resume? What kind of job applications? How do you fill those out? When you're looking for a job now with virtual interviewing, which is mostly what's happening, how are you going to do that? How do you present yourself virtually in a very short time within an interview? And then how do you follow up afterwards? And then we also talk up in this content about civic responsibility. And of course, right now, this is really key with voting, but understanding what rights and responsibilities you have. So if a student understands their IDEA or their IEPs or ADA, which is Americans with Disability Act, there's a lot of support for people with disabilities, but understanding that also means there's responsibilities that go with that. And then understanding voting, and then paying taxes. Just when you get a paycheck, what does that mean? What does it look like? So it's important to include this content in this workplace readiness. And then social skills. These social and interpersonal skills, in my experience in placing a lot of people, youth and adults with disabilities in jobs, this is often the area that, along with those employability skills under number one, that people can lose their jobs. Do they understand these social skills? Many of them are unwritten. So do you know that an employer, let's say your boss is talking to someone on the phone and their door is closed. Do you walk in and say, "Good morning"? No. Where is that written down? It's not written anywhere. So really having an understanding of like how close is too close, and just who is a boyfriend and girlfriend and who is really an acquaintance. There are so many issues with the social and interpersonal skills. So these are, and then just building those understanding of how to resolve conflicts, giving the students some skills and being able to problem solve. And then working as a team, of course, is really a part of the soft skills employers are looking for. So this content in the workplace readiness is really, I wrote it out so that you can think about what you would add to teaching students. And of course, this is all in the curriculum as well. So we also have assessments with each of the 5 required activities. And I just wanted to share the independent living assessment. Basically what we looked at was hygiene, food management, money management, or sort of that whole financial literacy area, interpersonal skills, community and housing and housekeeping. So in putting together these assessments, we do actually sell the assessment package separate, but it also comes with the pre-ed solution. And so we created assessments that we felt we could start each of these units. So when we're talking about these social skills, one of the things that we have to think about is that we have to talk to family. So what is the student doing at home? What are their skills? And so we looked at what's in the emerging, developing, proficient, and exceptional levels. So we have questions under emerging. If they've got those, good, they're starting. But then we can write our IEP goals to move them into the developing skills, moving them up to proficient skills, and of course, exceptional. So this is then helps in creating those IEPs, is looking at the content of these assessments, but it always takes conversations with family to see what indeed the student does know and what they're doing at home, and then building some of those skills and expectations. Clearly, it's important to build expectations for our students. And then in this category, we also have a travel journey assessment. And in this assessment, we look at how well does a student navigate their community? How well can they get around? Is there public transportation? But even just the basics of understanding how you can get across streets safely. And so we created this assessment in our county here in Wisconsin to look at people who were going to jobs, both youth and adults, and thinking about where are they on the scale? Are they independent? Can they go on, catch the bus? Do they know where to go? Or then working their way down, needing minimal supports. Maybe they need just some kind of visual cues. And maybe they need support through the process. And then the really highest, which is number 5, is they need actual attendant. Some people with some maybe physical challenges or other types of challenges. So in this travel journey, we had a variety of areas we covered, but for example, I wanted to give you one section which is called my directional skills. So you can see we have a scale of 1 to 5, which we had talked about, and then we add questions. So this isn't just an assessment, it also is building goals into having students understand how they can navigate their community. So for example, can identify landmarks for pickup and drop off locations. Where are they? Are they independent, or do they need someone to show them how, or do they need some type of adaptation? So what instruction strategies will be needed? What modifications or accommodations might they need? Maybe they need an app on their phone. Maybe they're going to need something in writing, maybe pictorial. And then what assistance or supports will they need? Will you walk with the students through that process several times before they would be independent at it? So we have a list of questions like, can they transfer on a bus? This would be someone who actually has some public transportation. And I know many people do not have that access to that, but also just navigating stairs and ramps, and can they get out to someone picking them up? So really talking about when they're dropped off, can they get into the workplace? So these are really great assessments that help you to understand where the student's at now, and then what IEP goals you might want to write to have that student progress. All right, so here is some other discussion about independent living skills. So household tasks, I always try to find resources when I'm presenting that are beyond the products that we have at Attainment Company. But Attainment Company has done a lot of materials, has created many materials in this independent living skills area, pictorial and video as well. But here was a really great, interesting article on teaching teens how to clean a house. So I thought I would add that in there. But here's some cooking skills. We have a Ready, Set, Cook product, but also I saw there was a lot of resources out there on teaching students with special education needs cooking. And so on YouTube, there were so many options there. So just even if you type in daily living skills or teaching students with special needs cook, there's a lot of YouTube videos, and I think YouTube videos are great. And you don't have to create them yourselves. They're usually short. You can work with your students. Now, if it's virtual, if you're still doing virtual classrooms, it might be an opportunity to do some microwave cooking, having the student be in their kitchen while you're doing a virtual lesson on using the microwave, and having a parent, of course, approve this. So there are a lot of options even when you're not in the classroom. Now, the other thing is job seeking skills. So actually having that student prepare resumes, I gave you some YouTube videos there of writing their first resume. And again, something that you can share with students virtually or in the classroom as well. And then how to fill out job applications, really helping students try different types of them. We always would have somebody have a cheat sheet with them, so they would all have the information would be all in front of them. Some of it might be by paper. A lot of students may still be maybe using phones or using iPads. So really including that, and then finding out who you're going to use for references for that student. Well, who knows them? It might be other teachers. It might be if they've had any work experiences, great. That would be employers, but also people who may know that student in the community. Those references are helpful for an employer. And then also another YouTube video on actually completing a job application. Now, resume building really is looking at, many of your students may not have a lot of experiences as you're building resumes. So you want to look at adding the whatever information you can. So if they've done any job shadows or work experiences, build those into the resume. And especially if they don't have anything that's paid employment, and maybe the work experience was, but write and have something in there that what did the student learn from that experience? When you're doing that, you also might want to consider a visual resume. So one of the things that we're talking about with a visual resume is what could you tell? It's like telling a story visually, but very short. A minute would probably be the most. And so basically you're going to put together a file, a very short video file. And now you can do this pretty easily, whether you're doing a Zoom meeting, whether you're doing Screencast-O-Matic is another one. There are a variety of ways to actually tape or video what we call a visual resume. But I would say what you're trying to do is tell about that student. So the student says, "Hi, I'm Janet Estervig, and I really love working with people. I love helping people, and I would love to have a job at your assisted living where I could do these tasks," and list the things that that student felt that they could do for that employer. So basically what we're looking at is telling why that student really wants to work there. Really short. So I really highly recommend it. I've got you a link there. All right, so the whole workplace readiness was pre-ETS 4, but pre-ETS 1 is looking on job and career exploration. Now, this is the process of having students actually look through what is it that they would like to do in their future and careers. So the content in the job and career exploration include vocational interest inventories. There are a variety of them. I'm going to give you some examples. Knowing what's current in your labor market right now, the labor market, of course, is very challenging, and we understand that. And so there may be opportunities that your students might be able to find niches within your current labor market, or maybe there isn't going to be a lot available for a while. But most students in special education don't always leave their communities. They'll stay in their communities. That's where their support system is, their families. And so often they'll stay in that community. So it's good to know what's in that community for jobs. And then non-traditional employment options as well. We often will think of the common entry-level positions, but what are some things out there that might be unique to that interest of that student? I always talk about bringing career speakers in, and really great opportunities to do this virtually. There is some websites, Vocational Skills Ability Profiler, I'll give you the link. And then the in-demand local jobs, we've talked about that. Developing vocational skills, participating in student organizations. So if there are any student organizations, so like let's say your high school has a healthcare student organization, or accounting, or whatever it is. If their student has some interest in those areas, it's so important to have those integrated opportunities, because that's where you build the connections, and it's a networking opportunity, even at the high school level. So the other part is matching skills with jobs. And often you'll have a student say, "I want to be a professional football player. I want to be an airline pilot." There's often, "I want to be a vet tech." There's often things that students think they would like to do. So what we do is we have to break those down into what is it that you have skills for. And during this career exploration time, this is when we can look at what's out there. What does it take to become a professional football player? Let's have a conversation about that. Here's the education. You need to be able to go to college. You need to get a scholarship typically in college to be able to play. And how do you get there? So it's really having the reality of what education's needed, what work experience is needed, what finances are needed in order to reach some of those career goals. And then having some more realistic expectations. Never to diminish a person's dream, but it might be the fact that they just love watching football. Can they maybe, do you have a professional team or another type of team in your community that they could maybe work at? I mean, vet tech, maybe they just like working with animals. What does that mean to be that? And looking at other options within their interest area. So in South Carolina, and I know not everybody at this conference is from South Carolina, but I wanted to give some resources. So you do have youth services with your vocational rehabilitation, and you've got American Job Centers. There's job centers all over the country. Whatever state you're from, there will be job centers available. And under WIOA, remember that was that Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act that was passed back in 2014. Under that, the job centers also are required to provide support and services for youth. So if you're not already accessing your local job centers, you do want to do that and talk to them. What are you offering youth? What opportunities can youth have at your job center? And again, now with virtual, they're probably doing job interview, virtual classrooms. You should be able to access their website for information on what job openings there are in your community. And then the Independent Living Council, there's the South Carolina one, but again, every state has one, has several. So the Independent Living Centers is where people with disabilities may get, again, additional resources. And they always weren't focused on youth, but they, under WIOA, have made some changes as well. And so they're required to reach out to youth. So hopefully your independent living centers have reached out to youth. Typically, people with physical disabilities tend to access those more. But thinking about they do classes on self-advocacy. And that's one of the 5 required activities. So check it out. So here's a picture of vocational interest inventory. I wanted to give you an example of it. And this was in our Pre-Ex 1, and it's in our assessment manual. So what we did is we looked at the Holland codes, and that's basically, we've done research for each of our assessments. And this happened to be, and we did balancing as well. We always write out in the assessment manual exactly how to score each of the assessments. And as I said, we used realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. These are under these categories, and they're well explained online as far as Holland codes. So we tried to make sure that we had pictures of both men and women, diverse pictures. And you want to think about that because often some vocational interest inventories, they still not do that as well. So you want to really build an interest area. And we have this, which picture of these 3 pictures would you really like to do? And this starts telling us what areas these students are interested in. Here's some examples of the Career One Stop Vocational Skills Inventory. And so in this Career One Stop, this is a website you can go to, students can go to research jobs or careers. And it gives an interest inventory, skills matcher, and work values matcher. I really like that. And then there's also a career interest assessment from Minnesota I really like. And then your South Carolina Department of Ed has transition assessments as well. And there's the link to those. Now, bringing in virtual guest speakers, I mentioned this earlier, but I really think this is a prime time where maybe a guest speaker might be hard to find in your community because they're out working in their jobs and they're not really willing to travel to your school and come in and have to go through that process to present or speak to your students. But virtually, they can do it right from their office or from their work setting, if they're still in those work settings, and be able to talk to your students. And maybe you just make it a shorter time period. Again, figuring out what interest your students have in those careers. And then looking at, here's some questions that I recommend that you may want to ask this person from this particular career. And this really helps to also build sort of that realistic understanding of what it takes in order to work in those types of jobs. And then we also talk about informational interviews. These are really great opportunities for your students. Again, can be all done virtually by having a time to meet with people that they know in careers that interest them. And if they're willing to record them, sometimes it's nice to share with your other students as well who may have similar interests. So one of them is really learning about that and then also getting advice from that individual. So it really helps you to explore ideas of what careers they may have, that what that business does, basically there's a little YouTube video on this, and then really saying, well, if I'm interested in this, what would you recommend I do? So this is often where we have students do all start in entry-level positions. So in those entry-level positions, what can that student learn? What skills can they gain in order to get that kind of job? So maybe someone says they want to be a chef. Well, where can you start building skills? Well, you start in entry level. You're not automatically a chef. You're going to do a lot of food processing and preparing food behind the scenes in the kitchen before you ever get to actually do all the cooking. So that getting those kind of work experiences and understanding that, and not having you the teacher telling them, but somebody who's actually working the field telling them. So this takes us to the next area, and this is that work-based learning. So work-based learning really is talking a lot about, now we have the student, so they were getting workplace readiness, getting ready, understanding I got to be clean, I got to look good, I got to be on time, I got to listen to my boss. And then they went into, sort of what are the jobs out there, that career exploration. Well, this is the work-based learning, and this is actually getting those opportunities to get those work experiences and job shadowing. And maybe your school is allowing students to go out into them, and maybe they're not, because it really varies across the country, quite honestly, about school district to school district. But here's the content that has been recommended under work-based learning. So first of all, what are work relevant academic skills? So what are skills that students may need in order to be able, competencies would they need in order to be successful in a job? And then having some on the job skills, like writing a checklist. And quite often, if you have job coach staff that are going out with students to get these work experiences, you're probably going to be putting together checklists of what the employer is expecting of them. They may be pictorial, maybe they're written out, might be on their phone, might be on an iPad. And then what's the role of the job coach? What is the job coach going to be doing? Student understanding the role of the job coach is really helpful. The job coach has to understand their own role, but this is the other piece of it, and that is really understanding, why is this school staff coming with me, and what are they supposed to do? Well, they're not supposed to do the work for you. They're supposed to teach you to do the job and support that independence at the work. So one of the things that some classrooms are doing too is looking at student-led enterprises. So what are some jobs and some experiences that you can do? And I'll tell you a little bit more in another slide. And then simulated workplace in the classroom. We typically want students to get the real life experiences out in the community, but again, with more schools doing virtual and just having less access to the community due to the risk of COVID, one of the things that we're looking at is what can we do to simulate workplaces in the classroom? And I'll tell you more about that. And then we talked about this, informational interviews, apprenticeships, internships, service learning, that's opportunities to volunteer. We learn so many work skills this way. What is a job shadow? What are some work experiences? And that often is a partnership with vocational rehabilitation. They will often be the partner in talking to businesses to prepare students. You be preparing students, but to set up job shadows or work experiences. So the benefits of having students working in the community, this is really significant. And often we have to work with families to really talk to them about, yes, your son or daughter can work, or your family member. Yes, it's important. And yes, they can. And so you can work and still get your Social Security benefits if that's important. Youth who work have better health outcomes. They actually track this. They have a stronger sense of belonging and purpose and self-worth. And I think that's for most anyone. As you know, when people are unemployed, how that diminishes them and makes them feel that lack of self-worth. Our society does this. And so we really want youth to also feel that, yes, I have a job like my mom or dad, or yes, I have a job like my brothers or sisters, or yes, I'm going to be the only one in my household who's working, and I'm proud of that. So when youth with disabilities work, they rely less on public benefits. This is a positive thing. They become taxpayers, and they will always spend their money in that community. If there are workers in that community benefits. And then businesses know that diversification of their workforce is really positive strength for companies. And so they see the benefits of hiring people with disabilities. And then We already know from studies, research, that having 2 or more paid community work experiences during high school means teens with disabilities are 5 times more likely to work in the community after high school. That, of course, just makes common sense. If they're getting these work experiences, they're making these connections to businesses, they have things to put on their resume, then they're having opportunities to work once they leave school. And isn't that what our goal is? IDEA and transition goals tell us we want students, we want youth to be prepared to live and to work and to recreate in their communities. Those skills are really the critical skills being taught during those transition times and before. So one of the things that we put together in this work-based learning is an employment assessment. The assessment really covers these 25 categories or 21 categories. And so one of the things that we talk about in this is really gathering information to find the best opportunities for that student to get those work experiences, job shadows, their interests. So this tells me really critical information. So let me give you an example. Transportation and mobility. So does the student live on a bus route? Can they safely cross the street? Can they bike to work? These are really, what is their transportation options? Just beginning to think about where they could have a job, and not just the kind of job. So these questions help lead me as a job developer or somebody who's going to be talking to businesses and wanting to set up job shadows or work experiences, or maybe jobs for my student. I need to have these transportation questions answered. Even things like social skills. Are they friendly or are they quiet and shy? This may tell you more information about, okay, are they going to be someone who would work behind the scenes, or are they going to be someone that would maybe work out with customers? So are they a work environment that would fit that student, should be quiet, like in an office setting, or can they manage sound and noise like in a factory setting? So these are the questions. What about their hygiene? You're going to be working on good hygiene, but is that student's home situation such that good hygiene is going to be a challenge? So you're not going to place them in a job that they work with food. Maybe there's a job that they could work with in recycling, or maybe there's a job they could work with animals, or that don't care as much if they have a little bit of an odor. So these are the things we always, when I did job placements for 25 years, my focus was, how do I do the best job match for that student or that youth or adult, based on all these questions that we asked. So here is some information on student-led enterprises. So we're seeing many people with disabilities have started to set up their own small businesses. And it's really neat to have students start thinking about this, especially students that may have a lot of physical needs or personal care or maybe medical needs. And so thinking about maybe there are things that they could do at home or in the classroom to earn money. So one of the things that this talks about, I've given you some examples of some student-led enterprises. We have had people set up their own businesses. We had a guy that sets up his own recycling. He picks up with the job coach, they pick up all the cans, people save them for him. And we have somebody who does dog grooming, dog walking. We have somebody who makes biscuits for animals, dog biscuits, and sells them. The local pet stores sell her products there, and she has a little picture and talks about what she does in making these at home. So it's interesting. There's a lot of jewelry making. There's so many opportunities out there to think about for student-led enterprise. Now, here's the thing I want to talk just briefly about: simulated workplace in the classroom. Of course, we always want students to get the real life experiences, but maybe you might have opportunities to prepare students. This would be like that pre-vocational experiences. So here's some examples of some simulated workplaces. Can you create a store? Maybe your schools already have these, where they can practice customer service or stocking shelves. And maybe right now there isn't, but in the future there'll be, again, student stores. They can practice handling money. And then can the school put together sort of a Google Classroom, where job coaches go out into actual businesses, or maybe your school staff can go out into businesses and then they show the jobs. Like, here's what it takes to bag groceries. They film the job coaches or the staff at that grocery store doing that. So being able to see exactly what jobs are done in a grocery store, the jobs that are done in a library, the jobs that are done in a pet store. But whatever the interests and just basic skills, you can actually go out and film some of these, bring them back, and have students watch these short videos and then discuss that and maybe even have opportunities to practice those skills in the classroom or in other parts of the building. Now here's apprenticeships. So apprenticeships, we find that youth in our special ed classes are not utilizing these like they could. Our Wisconsin Vocational Rehabilitation, we have a youth apprenticeship program, and they really encourage students to get involved in these. Well, here is ODEP, which is the Office for Disability Employment, and they put together a work video series, and this would be a great way for your students to look at what we may call more non-traditional jobs, but many of the youth apprenticeships are jobs that these students could potentially do. Sometimes they require additional education, and you may have students interested in going to your local technical college to be able to learn the skills with these apprenticeships. Now, setting up a job shadow. So I really like the idea of students having opportunities to really learn what's going on in businesses by just spending a day, half a day, maybe a few hours, being able to observe somebody in their job. Now, of course, this is people actually going to jobs, so these are probably more of our essential workers. And thinking about what are some jobs that they could go and observe if they're allowed into those work settings. So if they are, great. And this is a great way. What kind of questions might they ask? So you want to have, develop sort of a role play with that student. And then talking about how are they going to record the answers when they're looking at this job shadow? Will they have something that they can either record their voice, saying this is what I learned from my job shadow, or taking some type of notes? And then making sure that they're following whatever business etiquette is in that place of business, making sure they're dressed appropriately for that company. And then also just what is the typical etiquette requirement? And if masks are required, social distancing is required, this would be really important to know. And then knowing what they should wear. Will there be somebody accompanying them? Will you have a job coach? Is the employer okay with two people coming into that work setting? And then how are they going to get there? Is there going to be transportation provided by your school, or is the student expected to get there on their own? And then will they miss any of their classes, and making sure that you got all those permissions for that. So one of the things that we talked about in job shadowing, I've got some YouTube videos as well here. You might be able to do virtual job shadowing as well. So if you have friends, significant others, people you know that would be willing to take their phone and get permission, of course, from the employer, and be able to actually video a short video of the day in the life of. So this is my job. This is what I'm doing today. I take care of older people, and this is some of the things I do. And so actually being able to have a job shadow with a handheld device that person who is doing the job can kind of talk through, maybe with some questions, and then, or maybe it can be a Zoom meeting where students are actually watching in real time and can ask questions. So that's, asking somebody if they'd be willing to do that. And I'd start with friends, other teacher spouses, you ask around to find out, because I think that'd be a really awesome way for students to see real life jobs. Okay, so part of it is also inventorying your businesses. So what is available in your community? And so when you're talking about setting up these work experiences, job shadows, you need to look at building out where is the businesses, what type of companies, and where are your students interested in. So I just put these list of types of jobs together, but you're going to want to look at mapping out your community. So this is one of the things that I ask people who are actually trying to find jobs for students. Have students do some local research. What are the companies in your local area? Come up with a list of names and who are their contacts. And then ask around, does anyone know someone who works there, maybe family members? And then you want to put together this list, to put together a database, maybe an Excel spreadsheet, wherever you want, to list the potential places that could be job shadows or potential places for work experiences or potential places for future jobs for your students. So can you do informational interview with this company? Could you do a job shadow with this company? Could you ask about a work experience and get vocational rehabilitation as your partner, because sometimes they will help cover the first number of hours of wages during that training time. So the employer doesn't even have to cover the wages for that work experience. You'll have to get that a conversation with your school voc rehab counselor for that. So you want to get this mapped out and then engage these businesses. So you're going to say, where is it? Do I already know businesses? Have there been businesses we've worked with in our transition programs before? And then really, if there isn't, are you engaging them in a way that they understand what is the role of your school systems in transitioning students into employment? How are you connecting and partnering with businesses, and who is voc rehab? So even understanding that. So really understanding what is it that you're doing and who you are in your community, because schools are such an important part of our communities. And then, so you're going to contact each business, and then talk about, can you go in there and talk with them, or maybe you're going to need to set up virtual meetings with students, with businesses. And then also you're talking about, there's that job shadow idea. So Pre-ETS 3 is post-secondary training. So now you've gotten students gone through, what does it take to start my job? Here is the types of career exploration. Here's work-based learning. I actually have tried out some jobs. Now I realize I need some additional education and I need some additional training potentially. So the content in this area is looking at future employment outcomes for everyone. And maybe somebody who's on Social Security disability insurance, maybe they can only work under 20 hours, maybe 15 hours a week. But that's still 15 hours a week. Most people can still earn up to $1,000 a month and still keep their full SSDI, Social Security disability. Now, maybe they're on SSI, supplemental security income. Well, maybe they're going to be working and losing some cash benefits, but they can still keep their Medicaid benefits, which is their health care. And then there's the student exclusionary income, where students actually don't lose any dollars in their SSI check as they work up to a certain amount while they're still in school. When they leave school, then it does. So there is things about employment and finances. So we want to also know students' learning styles. In other words, what modifications and accommodations might they need? You think about an IEP talks about that. Well, with ADA, Americans with Disability Act, you're going to be looking at what accommodations reasonable accommodations an employer may make for a new employee coming in who has a disability. Is there some assistive technology that student might need? And then learning those executive functioning skills, all you have to do is Google to get the list of what those executive functioning skills are. Super important. Looking at other career pathways, planning for college. Many of the technical and two-year program colleges often have disability resource centers, as does the four-year universities. So really thinking about what might be possible for your students, and also making connections and planning for what is in the community, if that student's eligible for long-term care, Medicaid services, or what they call waiver services, and will they be eligible to transition into the adult service system? Then really understanding what their summary of performance and participating in their IEPs. So a learning style assessment is one of the things that we included in ours, but there are many. Here was just some, we put together yes, maybe, no, a bunch of questions, and then looked at, is this student more visual, more auditory, or more kinesthetic? Quite honestly, most of us learn under all three. But if you're giving all verbal instructions to that student, and they're much more of a kinesthetic or hands-on learner, it's going to go in and out another ear. So really thinking about, if they're a hands-on learner, how can you adapt the way you're teaching job skills in a different way? Maybe modeling, maybe showing, and then having the student do it instead of all verbal instructions. Here is the attainment assessment package, but also here's some other learning style inventories. I do know that we have Spanish speakers in our special ed classrooms. So what is my learning style for high school is also in Spanish. And then just understanding how we build a strengths inventory for our students. So here again, looking at virtual, is there past students, or maybe they can come into your classroom if you are doing in-classroom education. So are there students who have gone on to a 2-year program, or maybe a training program, or an apprenticeship, or a 4-year program? But are there programs, a student that you know that has done that and now is working in that field? Can they tell their story? It's so much more inspirational for a mentor, another student who has gone through the same program these students are in and has been successful in participating in additional education or additional training. And here are some questions maybe they can ask. But I really like the idea that a peer can talk to them about their experiences, and then they can ask direct questions of them. And then there are a lot of job modifications. Most of the modifications that we made when I was placing youth and adults in jobs was more of job restructuring. So if a person wasn't able to do the whole job, we would modify the job description and for the skill set that that particular individual had, still meeting an employer need, but within the skill set of the person that was going to be hired. So it was modifying. Sometimes we modified the way we trained. Sometimes we came up with some unique accommodations in a job. So that Jan, you see, your South Carolina Disability Resources has this library of assistive technology. Also, Jan is something that employers can go directly to look at how to restructure or develop accommodations for the job. We also have customized employment, which is really just changing entirely the job description. And then we have some ways here. There was a resource center on supporting students with learning disabilities. So I try to, again, find you some resources to look at modifying jobs or coming up with accommodations so that student can be as independent as they are able. So here are some more resources. That is actually our pre-ETS, which I've been showing some slides on, but there are other resources out there. I really like that Project 10 Transition Education Network. If you've never gone to their website, they have so many free resources there. This one happened to be planned for a future career, but they had a lot of different resources. And then thinking about colleges for some of your students with intellectual or developmental disabilities, there are colleges across the country that students are now going to. There are also colleges in South Carolina and in North Carolina that are open to bringing in students and having them get a college experience. All right, so the last of the 5 pre-ETs is self-advocacy. And so self-advocacy really, to me, is so important that we look and help build that knowledge of what is my disability. Here's the content that was recommended by WIOA under self-advocacy. So I've talked to some Disability Resource Center at the University of Whitewater, and they said that they'll have students come there that are not even able to explain what their disability is. They're going to a 4-year university, and they can't clearly explain what their disability is, nor what accommodations they may need. So we want students to really recognize what are their strengths, but also where are their challenges and where are they going to get those additional resources and where do they need those to be successful. So also that positive self-talk. I just think it's so important that students have an opportunity to really know what is good about me, because I know they've probably been teased and bullied and have, even probably attended IEP meetings that heard a lot of negative comments. So we just really want to build a student to understand they have strengths. Of course they have challenges, but let's talk about how do we change those challenges? How do we find those barriers to employment or living on your own? What are those barriers? And let's figure out ways to overcome those barriers. I do love mentorship. I think peer mentorship, anytime you can build that. But also there's mentors that may be out in different careers that student might be interested in. Maybe they email once a month with somebody in a business. Being able to take part in IEP meetings. There's a lot now on, putting together a PowerPoint to be able to present who I am and what I want in my own IEP meeting. And then that includes communication skills. How do they communicate with each other? How do you find solutions? What are my strategies for success? And then how do I self-regulate? And we're going to talk a little bit about mindfulness, but how do I self-regulate, but also know that how well I am doing, but when I need to calm down, and then making decisions and writing goals. So mindfulness is really talking about how we build that mind body. How do we relax, meditate, yoga, and breathing? And I love this picture, mindful or mindful. And really, it really helps students, give them the tools to learn how to de-escalate themselves. How do I, if I'm frustrated or I'm angry, how do I build that relaxation and breathing? Teaching these skills are so critical. And they have found that in education, there's research benefits on this, and I've given you the link to it. But it really has been found that when classrooms are using mindful techniques, and it does mean everybody needs to be trained on it, it decreases that aggressive behaviors, it improves attention, and decreases anxiety, pain management. It's amazing. It promotes social skills, increasing self-esteem. I mean, all of these, every single thing on this list are things that we would like for outcomes for our students. So here's some examples of some time management, stress management, and some mindful exercises. Again, I want to give you the resources to help you to implement the things that I'm talking about with those 5 required activities under pre-ETS. So when we think about the 5 required activities, one of the things is that discovery. What are your strengths and challenges? So that really is that process of knowing, who am I, that self-advocacy. And then that vocational profile, personality, their work setting interests, what job interests do they have? That's that whole job and career exploration, pre-ETS. And so thinking about all of that. Then the actual job planning, networking, and that community mapping, engaging employers, that's under the work-based learning, and setting up job shadows, and then using these experiences for future jobs. All of you, think about the very first job you had the first one, or maybe the first few. I worked on a farm picking cucumbers. I worked at an A&W, being a car hop. So thinking about the things that you did, what things did you learn in those jobs? Those are the work experiences, those entry-level jobs that we learn critical, important soft skills, that we had to be on time, that we had to listen to our boss, that we had to come to work smelling good, that we had to be friendly to our customers, that we had to complete our tasks that were asked of us to do that day. I mean, there's so many things. Or maybe that you never want to have this kind of job ever. So it does tell us that that isn't a job I want to do. And so that leads us in building those post-secondary education and training, which is pre-ETS 3, is thinking about what other options, what other opportunities might there be, and what might I need to do in order to get that training. So here are some inventory businesses in your area. So I pulled up some things about South Carolina, for example. So here's your Department of Employment and Workforce. These are resources you can use with your students. The Chamber of Commerce's, there's Chamber of Commerce's in whatever state you are. And think about what are those chambers, and then connecting to them in your local community. Here's the largest employers in South Carolina. Are there students getting work experiences in these businesses? They're huge corporations. So let's talk to them. And somebody, maybe it's going to take someone from the school board to talk to larger corporations. But thinking about, how do you build this connection to businesses in your communities, and looking at all of the businesses, large, medium, and small. And then I really want you to understand the importance of Social Security benefits. This is really, yes, you can work, and I described a few earlier, but here's the Red Book that explains some of the employment-related provisions. There are many things that you can do. And if you're unsure and this is really beyond what your focus, then really talk to the vocational rehabilitation counselor, because they may be able to do a benefits analysis to help that student and their family to know exactly what the situation, if they work, how many hours, getting these wages, how will that impact that student's benefits? And then remember that we want competitive integrated employment outcomes for all your students, all youth. So there's what we call employment first movement. Here in North and South Carolina are some examples of employment first. APSE is also an organization. There's organizations that really are supporting the idea that we want our students, when they graduate, to have had work experiences, job shadows, maybe service learning, and then maybe they leave with a job as well. So we want them all to have this. Wisconsin, when I was at the Department of Health Services, we put together our guiding principles of why we want all students to be in competitive integrated employment, and adults. And this is changing the way we're providing services in Wisconsin and across the country and doing less of what we call segregated settings of what would be community rehab programs, or maybe typically called sheltered workshops or day programs. The idea is we want to segregate less, integrate more. And all of the Medicaid funding coming to the states is under some new laws that are happening as of 2023, requiring that all programs have more opportunities for integration and being part of their community. So your students, let's get them started right away to being fully integrated in their communities. So employment, everyone can. Here's videos. I wanted to show you examples. I love having videos because this is something your students can watch and go, yes, I can work. And your families to watch and go, yes, I can work. And maybe your other staff in your school say, oh, yes, those students can work. So here are some videos, and I have more. I've got lots of videos. So the first one is Ben. And that one, you actually have to go to Attainment, to our pre-ets, and then there's a big picture that has us unpacking all of the pre-ets, but in there's a little bar, and in there is Ben talking about working at Waukesha Memorial Hospital. I really recommend you watching it, because also the parents are talking in this about how important the skills are that Ben has gained through getting, first of all, the work experience that he was with Project Search, and then now that they've hired him. And then this is a free resource. I highly recommend you using it. It's called explorework.com. They created here in Wisconsin, but it's for anybody. And you can sign up and sign in a student for free, and they can walk through the process of looking at exploring work possibilities. And then the Let's Get to Work, I hate just being just Wisconsin, but this happens also to be a great website for schools. They did these great projects, and so they have videos and they have toolkits on projects with schools to really enhance both the integration and inclusion within the school, but also in jobs. And they've done some really neat projects with the funding that they received. And then Skills to Pay the Bills. It's a free curriculum. It was developed by ODEP. You can download this, or you can also ask for a copy. And it's on all those workforce readiness skills for youth. It's free. It's got all lesson plans. It's got materials. And I think you'll really enjoy that. And then the web resources, here's Think College, we'll take you to those assistive technology. If you have students with physical disabilities, here's a great way to look at loan libraries, some guides. Here's some South Carolina and WIOA and pre-ETS resources. So in the end, what we want is our students to have experiences working and living in their own, participating in their IEP, and participating in their goal setting with their vocational rehabilitation counselor, because we want them to be living, working, and recreating in their community. So here is our information. Angel Lee is your contact for North and South Carolina, but you can always email me for a copy of this PowerPoint. If any of these resources were of interest to you and you want more information about them, please let me know. If you want a copy of I have copies of Job Profile. I have other trainings on financial literacy and job coach training, engaging employers. So just email me if you have an interest for additional resources. And I appreciate being able to take this hour with you. And if you have any questions, we can certainly talk about it either at the end of this session or certainly email me. And thank you so very much for participating.